What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors comes face to face with television's most ruthless morning show host? You won't believe what unfolds when Hugh Grant sits down with Lorraine Kelly for what was supposed to be a simple promotional chat, only to witness the most explosive confrontation in daytime television history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of The Lorraine Show promised nothing more than a charming conversation about Grant's latest film project, but what viewers witnessed instead was a masterclass in how quickly television gold can turn to absolute chaos. From the moment Hugh Grant walked onto that brightly lit set, something felt different. The usually composed actor appeared tense, his trademark charm noticeably absent as he settled into the guest chair opposite Kelly. The trouble began almost immediately when Kelly, with her signature saccharine smile plastered across her face, decided to veer away from the agreed-upon talking points. Instead of discussing Grant's new romantic comedy, she launched into what can only be described as an ambush interview, bringing up the actor's well-documented struggles with the British press from decades past. "Hugh, darling, we simply must talk about your relationship with the media," Kelly began, her tone deceptively sweet yet loaded with malicious intent. "After all those phone hacking scandals and your very public battles, don't you think it's time to forgive and forget?" Grant's jaw visibly tightened as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The veteran actor clearly hadn't expected this line of questioning, especially not delivered with Kelly's trademark passive-aggressive cheerfulness. "Lorraine, I thought we were here to discuss my film," he replied, his voice measured but carrying an unmistakable edge of irritation. But Kelly wasn't finished. Like a predator sensing weakness, she pressed forward with even more inflammatory questions. "Oh, but Hugh, the public is fascinated by your transformation from the lovable, bumbling romantic lead to this rather bitter campaigner against press freedom. Some might say you've lost that charm that made you famous." The studio audience fell silent, sensing the mounting tension between the two television veterans. Grant's famous composure began to crack as Kelly's words hit their mark. His hands gripped the arms of his chair, knuckles whitening as he struggled to maintain his professional demeanor. "Bitter campaigner?" Grant repeated, his voice rising slightly. "Lorraine, I've been fighting for privacy rights and ethical journalism, something I'd hope someone in your position would understand rather than mock." Kelly's response was swift and cutting. "Oh, come now, Hugh. You made millions playing the charming Englishman, then spent years whinging about the very industry that made you rich and famous. It does seem rather ungrateful, doesn't it?" The atmosphere in the studio became electric with tension. Crew members exchanged worried glances as Grant's famous politeness began to evaporate completely. His voice, now stripped of any diplomatic pretense, carried a cold fury that made the morning show set feel more like a courtroom. "Ungrateful?" Grant's laugh was hollow and bitter. "Ungrateful for having my private life dissected by tabloid vultures, for having my phone hacked, for watching innocent people destroyed by the very media machine you're so eager to defend?" Kelly, realizing she had struck a nerve, doubled down with the ruthless efficiency that had made her both famous and feared in British television. "But Hugh, surely you understood what came with fame. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You took the money, you enjoyed the spotlight, and now you want to complain about the consequences." The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Grant's face had gone pale, his usual affable expression replaced by something much darker and more dangerous. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but filled with barely contained rage. "The consequences, Lorraine? You mean like watching friends commit suicide because of media harassment? Like seeing families torn apart by lies printed for entertainment? Those consequences?" Kelly, seemingly oblivious to the pain she was inflicting or, perhaps simply not caring, pressed her attack with renewed vigor. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Hugh. That's the business we're all in. If you couldn't handle the heat, perhaps you should have stayed out of the kitchen." The callousness of her response was the final straw. Grant stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. The sound cut through the tense silence like a gunshot, making everyone in the studio jump. His eyes blazed with a fury that made Kelly's practiced smile falter for the first time since the interview began. "The heat?" Grant's voice was now trembling with emotion. "You call the destruction of innocent lives heat? You sit there with your fake smile and your vapid questions, contributing to the very culture that ruins people. And you have the audacity to lecture me about gratitude. Kelly, perhaps realizing she had pushed too far but unable to back down without losing face, made one final, devastating mistake. Hugh, I think you're being rather hysterical. Perhaps you should sit down and we can discuss this like adults. The word hysterical seemed to echo through the studio like a slap. Grant's composure, already hanging by a thread, snapped completely. His voice, when it came, was ice cold and filled with contempt. Hysterical? How dare you? How absolutely dare you minimize legitimate concerns about media ethics and human decency as hysteria? You represent everything that's wrong with this industry: the shallow opportunism, the complete lack of empathy, the willingness to destroy anyone for the sake of ratings. Kelly's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating predator beneath the morning show host persona. Now, see here, Hugh. You're a guest on my show, and I won't be spoken to like that. You're being completely unreasonable. But Grant was beyond caring about television protocol or professional courtesy. Years of suppressed anger and frustration poured out in a torrent of barely controlled fury. Unreasonable? What's unreasonable is expecting basic human decency from people like you. What's unreasonable is thinking that fame somehow strips away a person's right to privacy and dignity. The studio had become a powder keg, with crew members frozen in place and the audience watching in stunned silence as one of Britain's most beloved actors and its most prominent morning show host tore each other apart on live television. Kelly, her voice now shrill and defensive, made her final play. If you can't handle a simple interview without having a complete meltdown, perhaps you shouldn't be in the public eye at all. The words seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. Grant stared at her with undisguised disgust, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled emotion. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute finality. You're absolutely right, Lorraine. I shouldn't be here. No decent person should have to subject themselves to your particular brand of toxic journalism masquerading as entertainment. Without another word, Hugh Grant turned on his heel and walked toward the studio exit. Kelly, desperate to salvage something from the wreckage of her interview, called after him with false sweetness. Hugh, don't be silly. Come back and we'll sort this out. But Grant didn't even pause. He strode past the shocked crew members and stunned audience, his dignity intact, despite the chaos he was leaving behind. As he reached the studio door, he turned back one final time, his voice carrying clearly across the silent set. I came here to talk about my film, to give your viewers a few minutes of entertainment. Instead, I've been subjected to a masterclass in everything wrong with modern media. Congratulations, Lorraine. You've proven every point I've ever made about the toxicity of this industry. With that, Hugh Grant walked out of the studio, leaving behind a shell-shocked host, a stunned audience, and what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about moments in daytime television history. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow seemed louder than any shouting match, marking the end of an interview that had spiraled so far out of control that it would be remembered long after both participants had left the public eye. Kelly sat alone on her set, her practiced smile nowhere to be seen, surrounded by the wreckage of what had started as a simple promotional interview and had become a devastating exposé of the dark heart of celebrity culture and media manipulation.